I attended Temple University with 20,000 women. Deanna, my future wife, was one of the 3 most beautiful women. The 3 goddesses sat together one day, captivated every Captiveria man. When I asked permission to sketch the 3 females, Sally and I were study buddies. I didn't know the other 2. "Have you more essential tasks?" the tall brunette Deanna asked. Taking her hand, I declined. She then advised, "You to sketch well. Naturally, it will help." I said, "You 3 ladies inspire me." The most gorgeous woman I had ever dated was a 6+ and she was 10. Deanna didn't like me till Sally. After looking at the sketch, one of the other 3 gorgeous women kissed me passionately. I recognized what she was doing when she winked. Deanna, gazing at Sally with triumph that she had stolen me, checked the sketch and kissed me fiercely. "You're quite talented," she said. Sally winked again and pointed to Deanna behind her back. She and Sally knew about my interest in Deanna. I can intrigue Deanna. In envy, she wanted to provoke her. Sally kissed me goodbye. Deanna grabbed my hand. "You must be special to attract Sally. I'm single. You dating someone?" Shaking my head, she said, "Well, you do now. We've dated since." Perhaps she wouldn't have liked me if she hadn't been quirky, impetuous, and possibly bizarre. That artwork and others of my wife and kids are on our living room wall. I quit drawing by hand. I know computers well. Not sure what. I soon grasped what she saw in me. She mistreated everyone who approached her. She had autistic spectrum issues, which I found years later. Asperger impacted her. Only I could accept her occasional insults by making jokes. I never understood why they broke up, because she insulted all the other guys that liked her. I knew they didn't like her. We started dating at 18. At 26, we moved to Los Angeles, married at 21, and had our first child at 24. My wife rarely says more than "pass the salt." She spoke less after discovering that most of what she said was unimportant or quite insulting. I didn't understand when dating. We discovered she had depression after we married. She often cried for hours. Sometimes cuddling and telling her the kids and I loved her would brighten her up. Maybe a smarter person would have left her, but I loved her too much and would never leave our kids. Maybe some children thrive after divorce, but I've never seen any. Did I mention that she was the most beautiful lady I had ever met, not just dated? Some nights I lay awake admiring my beautiful wife and worshiping God. I must be shallow. What now? I also found that working harder made her pleased. I was the opposite. We started a successful advertising agency as seniors. I did the creative work while my spouse did everything else. We were a great team. We bought a fixer-upper in a promising neighborhood for a low price, even though it was hazardous. Every spare cash was spent remodeling it for years. We built weightlifting and media rooms where I exercised almost daily. I was in decent condition. I had to be if I wanted to keep my wife, since men were pursuing her. I loved every minute of our 24/7 collaboration in good times and bad. Deanna sought to fill her gaps, so I tried. They can keep friends. Our 3rd child arrived in the blink of 25 years. Everything went wrong, and I was blind. My husband changed. She cried in my arms one day, telling me males stopped flirting or glancing at her when she entered a place. She desperately needed and missed that. Even though I told her she was still beautiful, she cried every day as she gazed in the mirror at her wrinkles. She cried, stating she had lost all joy since we married so young. I said she missed getting herpes or worse, and having her heart broken constantly. Despite multiple guys pursuing her, my spouse never acknowledged them. Looked at another man. I was stable because to her faithfulness. My wife started carpooling with Carol, a friend, to our youngest son's primary school, changing everything. I was thrilled when my spouse finally had a friend. She was a realtor. She married someone I knew. Barry was a divorce attorney, but I didn't know he used his wife to break up the marriages of women she befriended. Carol received a bonus commission and listing for the divorcee's house. My wife regularly cited Carol's criticisms and started comparing me to rich Barry and criticizing me for working too much and making too little. I worked additional hours to send our 2 older children to Ivy League schools. They had little money after tuition. Our property was now worth $2 million, a huge rise. Deanna constantly complained about Carol's husband buying her a Mercedes. They traveled regularly and had a Carmel vacation home. To disappoint my wife broke my heart. I tried to please her for 25 years. Clearly, she didn't care. She and Carol had a girls' night out every Saturday. Deanna, my Asperger's wife, never knows when to stop talking. Revealed after the first night that Carol didn't understand why Deanna chose me when she could do better. I'm not stupid. I didn't object. I borrowed a friend's car to follow them on their next trip. They went to a club and met Carol's lovely younger friend, who danced too close to my wife all night. Despite wanting to approach them and knock the guy unconscious, I took photographs and waited in the parking lot next to my wife's car. When she left with the guy, I would have beaten this tall, slim, lovely lad in the parking lot and gone to jail delighted. Carol and my wife left without him. I sought a solution to my wrath and despair. I made tea for us and rushed my wife home. She recounted her night, including having danced with males. Each time, a lie from her. I knew to be careful. My wife must have been quite turned on by my flirting with the other guy because she spent the night making out with me until I begged for forgiveness. She spent the week in our backyard talking on her phone quietly. We discovered on our credit card account that she had bought provocative goods and hidden them from me. Instead of a ladies' night out, my wife stayed home the next week because her car wouldn't start. I disconnected the battery. I hoped this time, surrounding my wife's feelings for them would decrease. I wanted to repair our relationship. I suggested we take a film course at the nearest college to view forthcoming films. My wife looked open to the idea, but she declined the next day. She said Carol warned her not to take a class with me since it was a control tactic. Still, what does that mean? Complete nonsense? Relentless. I bought ballet tickets for Saturday night. My wife declined despite loving ballet because I went out with Carol again. My marriage was tanking. Carol and my wife returned to the bar that week. My wife sat close to the man and I was far away yet visible. I hid my identity with sunglasses, a hat, and a wig. Usually my non-drinking wife caught up. My wife became tipsy with her boy toy's hands between her thighs. As he raised his hand, she kissed him. I was fed up with her craze for her guy toy. A pitcher of beer may alleviate many life problems, I thought. At the next table were two drunk, broke guys who wanted to drink. I offered $500 at the bar for two huge beer pictures. If after purchase, they would fall over a beer picture and dump it over my wife. They agreed, and my wife and her expensive new clothing and shoes were coated in half a gallon of beer and smelled like a brewery. She tried to dry off in the women's toilet after cursing guys. After leaving the restaurant, she returned to her car alone. I kept a safe distance. The car veered off her lane. She drank too much. I reported a drunk motorist to the police. I gave them her make, license plate, and Wilshire Boulevard direction. When the cops stopped my wife, they saw alcohol and arrested her for DUI. I told her I was furious and let her stay in the drunk tank all night before coming to fetch her. I told her I wouldn't aid her with girls' nights out again. Carol was right, she said. I was domineering and envious, therefore I didn't want Carol to enjoy herself. Then I won't save you. Call Carol for assistance. I'm leaving. After crying and pleading, I got her out of jail and she pledged to stop going on girls' nights out. Carol stopped dating, but she kept meddling in my marriage. Carol had a secret motive when she invited us to dinner. She and her spouse directly questioned our wealth and my wages. I was assessed by how much they could squish me in divorce. They asked us over for another reason. They asked me to check at their broken computer because I work with graphic applications all day and am competent at it. Computers. I told them to drink in the den while I fixed the office computer. I rectified the problem by turning it off and on, as usual. I wanted to know my opponents because I was curious. I quickly located the husband's QuickBooks and accounting data on the computer. While reviewing his TurboTax form, I found that he only contributed $20,000 to the IRS while making approximately $500,000 for 5 years. I carried all this information in my pocket after printing. You shouldn't underestimate me. You will never realize I am seeking you. It was coming for them. After we left that night, my wife informed me Carol had invited me to spend a week at her vacation cottage in Carmel, California, 300 miles north of Los Angeles, starting Labor Day Friday. That was great. Tired, she needed slumber. I hired a private eye to follow her the next day, maybe for sex. I packed 24 condoms in her luggage as a fuck you. I bought a burner phone at the PI's suggestion to complicate divorce. We related subpoena for our correspondence. My wife fell while carrying 2 large suitcases out of the house. Her eye was slashed black when she faltered and fell on the rise. The PI likely followed her to her friend's seaside property, but called to say my wife picked up a man at Carroll's instead of Carroll. They went 100 miles south instead of north to Carmel. My wife's dancing partner in the photo I gave the PI was the same. Finally, they reached Laguna Beach Hotel Room 515. The PI whispered since police were in the hotel restaurant. He asked what I wanted. Remembering my wife's black eye, I instructed him to report a prostitute being battered in that room in a hurry. I hoped the police could stop them before sex. The party. After the PI told me my wife was marched out of the room fully dressed, she was busted for prostitution 5 minutes later. For abuse and violence, her spouse was arrested. My crying wife called an hour later. She asked me to release her. She wouldn't describe the offense, merely her location. Faking ignorance, she didn't answer why she wasn't in Carmel. $5,000 was her bail. I promised to drive down after withdrawing the cash when our bank opened in the morning. I didn't travel down to save her or get cash. I wanted to imprison her for the 3-day Labor Day weekend since she hadn't learned from her one night in jail last month. I witnessed her plead guilty at her arraignment, wearing chains, clad in orange jail uniform. I have seen my wife confused, upset, pleased, and sad. However, this was my first time seeing her completely devastated and defeated. It was her lowest point. It was suspected she was a prostitute since her bag included several condoms. Her jail term was 6 months. If she avoided problems for a year, the sentence was suspended. Carol was shocked by her lawyer husband. He substituted for my wife's John, who got along with Carol's spouse. I found out via my PI that Carol's husband had represented all 3 women in 3 previous divorce issues involving the lover. My wife urged me not to divorce, but I found that. Carol connected a gigolo with my naive wife to obtain a 6% commission on our $2 million home, and her husband a few $100 representing her. Being too busy adoring my kids and my crazy, neurotic, unhappy wife kept me from filing. Second, I wouldn't give that murderous lawyer and his wife a dime. Since I would lose my younger child, property, and alimony to my ex-wife until Judgment Day, I wanted to stay married. I also didn't want to relocate from my gorgeous home to a rundown walk-up 1-bedroom apartment. Finally, my wife regarded Carol as a simpleton and weak-willed friend who was merely acting. A willing scapegoat who is readily deceived. While some individuals got away with adultery, I promised my wife that karma would always find her, and I would let her rot in jail for 6 months next time. I also threatened to distribute her conviction papers and mug photos to everyone she had ever known if I suspected she was seeing someone else. I said that I sometimes followed her places with a private eye, and sometimes alone. If she strayed, I would know and punishment would be swift and terrible. She said no when I asked whether I was a bad spouse. She became addicted to a charming young man who felt she was pretty and desirable's attention, affirmation, and praise. She also missed the arranged excursion to Laguna Beach and the club gathering. I said, "If you enjoy prison, you can continue. I'm a laid-back person who last fought in 9th grade. He was bigger than me. I kept going even though I knew he would beat me up, and he did it. My nose bled as I departed. The only damage I caused was blood on his clothing. I'm not vicious unless you rape my family or myself. Despite losing, I won't quit." Barry's financial information and tax return were sent to the nearest franchise tax office, California, and federal IRS offices. They said that if my information was right, I may win. I fucked him more. Tax evasion is a morally reprehensible offense that can cost a lawyer or realtor their license. My last 2 stops were the Real Estate Commission and the State of California Bar Association, where Barry and Carol filed their taxes and accounts. The IRS's forensic accountants found Barry embezzling customer funds. He hired a gigolo to dissolve marriages, but the state bar didn't mind. I called him a nasty scoundrel who destroyed families. They gave me the idea that I was a simpleton unworthy of their attention. I then called the lawyer a scumbag. That's probably redundant. What else would a lawyer do but run out? Several months later, I was happy to read in the news about Barry, a local divorce lawyer who was charged with tax evasion and had his license revoked. Over $1 million owed to the Franchise Tax Board and IRS by Barry and Carol. The IRS recovered approximately $400,000 in unreported cash from his home safe. Barry went to prison for 2 years. His home and cars were confiscated to pay his taxes. got the Mercedes-Benz of his wife at an IRS song auction. If you don't pay taxes, Barry and Carol's high life is easy, I informed my wife. After paying my taxes, I discovered I was an embarrassment with far less money than them. I gave my wife a lavish Tahiti vacation after a year with an IRS reward of $40,000, where we completed marriage reconstruction. Our local grocery store worker Carol is overweight, to boast. I always wait in line at her pay register and grin at her. She must pass her old Mercedes-Benz convertible in the parking lot to go to her 20-year-old Honda Rust bucket, so I let her know I own it. She never understood how the IRS grabbed her and her husband. The karma is a bitch. Sometimes an unappreciative spouse must help. It was a decade ago. After our Tahiti vacation, our marriage didn't recover for a year, but my wife learned and now walks the walk like Johnny Cash. Thanks for looking. If you liked this video, like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like it. Until next time.